Hi creatives! Today I'm teaching you everything you need to know to run great discovery meetings that starts off a really good relationship with your clients. It will also save you lots of time designing and make sure your job is a lot easier. This is part 2 of me sharing my full design process. Last week we talked about everything that happens before you actually start a project, like creating invoices and contracts and proposals. So if you want to go check that out first, I'll put it up here in a card and I'll add it down in the description as well. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Malin and I've been running my branding studio together with my partner since 2015. I made this series so you can avoid all the mistakes that I've made and get right to creating a great design business. So let's jump into the discovery meeting. So now that your client has paid, signed the contract, and they're on board with the project, we want to make sure that we can learn as much as we possibly can about their business and goals and vision before we start designing, so that what we create will be really targeted and will help them create a really effective brand. This will be the first longer type of connection that the client has with you. So we want to make sure that we do a little bit of research ahead of time. So what I like to do is to read the client's website or make sure that any material that they have, like a social media profile or a website, we're checking and learning about their business. And I also like to have a quick look at some competitors that I could find. This means that you're a lot more familiar with the industry that your client is in, and you can ask a lot more targeted questions. So it shows that you're really invested in this brand and you want to make sure that you're doing a good job. A really big part of the discovery meeting is being able to ask follow-up questions and really get to the bottom of what a client means when they say something. And this is why I really like to have a meeting, either a digital one or in person, rather than sending, let's say, a questionnaire with different questions about their brand. When we send a form with questions, we're not able to ask, what does this mean to you? When you say feminine, what does that mean? And that means that it's a lot harder for us when we start designing to know which choices we need to make. So having a meeting where you're having that one-to-one connection is really, really important. I have 2 kind of quick pro tips that I want to bring up before we get into the actual meeting. And this first one is that after you have that initial chit-chat that always goes on at the beginning of a meeting, suggest that everyone turns off their camera. Of course, this is if you're having a digital meeting. Because what I've noticed is that, let's say we have a 1.5 to 2 hour meeting, when we're just talking about all these really fundamental questions about a business, if everyone's at the same time thinking about like, am I smiling enough? Can you see my cat in the background? Like, it becomes really, really distracting. So what we say is, make sure that you feel comfortable, have that conversation in the beginning, and then say, okay, we're gonna turn off our cameras now. Everyone's gonna feel comfortable and we're just gonna focus on your business and your goals. And I found that that makes everyone a lot more comfortable. So that's one pro tip. The second one is to lead the meeting by sharing your screen the whole time. So we're gonna talk about what goes into the setup of the meeting, but I think sharing your screen, it means that you can guide your client through each step or each section that you have questions for. And this way you're not getting distracted by, let's say, your client starting to, oh, I'm just going to show you this website from a competitor I thought was interesting, which can get quite derailing of the meeting if you start having those tangents. So leading the meeting through sharing your screen is a really smart choice. To hold a really solid discovery meeting, I think you need 4 things. The first one is a really clear structure that your client understands up front and then they can follow throughout the meeting. This doesn't only make it clearer, but it also makes the meeting not feel as long, because I feel like these meetings tend to take about 2 hours, and that is quite a long time if your client doesn't know what's next. The next up is an engaging format. So if we would just have, let's say, a blank page in front of us as we share a screen and we're typing, that can be quite boring, to be honest. So what I like to do is I like to use tools to set up, let's say, different competitor maps, or to set up, let's say, a collaborative aspect. So I'm going to talk about how to do that a little bit later in this video, but having an engaging format where it feels collaborative, it feels like you're having this exciting insights together, that's a really good thing to think about when you're preparing for your meeting. And the last 2 things you need are a smart way to record everything that's being said, and then for you to be able to take all this information, compile it, and send it to your client. So this can be done in lots of ways, and I'm going to cover those as well. Let's start with the structure of the meeting. So what questions to ask and in what way to ask them. So we need a couple different things in order to be able to create a brand. First off, we need to know everything about the business and the current brand. How has it performed? Are there things that aren't working, things that are working? How can we improve on it? All these things that will teach us about the company and their vision. This is relevant even if it's a new company, because they might still have ideas of things that they think are important for them. We also really want to understand the goal of the new brand. So is it to build more trust, to reach a new audience, or maybe to fix something like retention in the company, for example? And lastly, we want to understand everything from their customers, their competitors, their offer, all of these different information points that help us design a very intentional brand. So keeping all of this in mind, I like to use this structure for my discovery meetings. The very first section is called Background about your company. And here I like to give my client quite a free rein to just talk about why they started their company, what their vision is, if they have like a mission that really drives them, kind of their origin story, and to get a little bit more personal about why they care about the business and all these different things that help us get to know the people, but also the business itself. If they've already been running the business for a while, I also like to ask about the current brand. So trying to get really specific with what is not working. Why did you want to do a rebrand? Or maybe asking, what are some things that you actually really like about your brand that you would like to keep? Maybe they really like their logo, but the rest of the brand isn't working. Or maybe they really feel attached to a color in the brand, but the rest of it isn't working. Because all these things are super helpful when we start designing, because otherwise we may get really far down the line and realize, oh, but it doesn't have this color that they liked and they never told us. So asking about all these things up front is super helpful. A new question that I added to this section that has actually been so helpful is to ask them to describe their dream office or dream shop. So even if they never actually plan on having an office or a shop, it's just a mental exercise to think about, like, how do you feel when you come in through the shop? Are you greeted by someone? Is it like an all AI experience? How does it feel? Is it like a wood floor? Is it lots of art everywhere? Is it super bright? Or is it like really colorful? Or what does it feel like? Do you want it to be exciting? Do you want it to be calm? All these different things that people can start to paint up a picture, and you can start to understand how that space would look and feel. And that gives you an idea of the experience that they want to create for their customers through their brand. Next up, I want to talk about their offer. So basically what they're selling. And this is for us to really understand what the business does and understand how they're different. So let's say, for example, they're selling backpacks. Are those backpacks different from all the school backpacks because these are specifically done for hiking and they have compartments specifically made for camping gear, for example? All these different things can help us understand who this product is for and also how they're different from competitors, so that we can lift out these things when we create the brand. A bonus question that you can ask, which can be really helpful, is to ask, what do you want to be known for? Sometimes there's like one feature or one key benefit that they've always felt really proud of. And so asking what they want to be known for, it could be something like a feature, but it could also be something like, we're the highest quality, or we have the best prices, for example, or we're the most sustainable. So asking what they want to be known for can actually be quite revealing. The third section is all about their customers. And this is, for me, the last section I do before we take a break. So I always let my clients know that this is going to be a section we do now, and then after this, we're going to take a break. So for the customers, what I want to find out is everything from demographics to psychographics. So demographics is everything very basic about a person, like their age, their income, or their location, for example. While psychographics are much more in-depth information about why someone chooses to buy something. Like maybe they really align with the mission of the company, or it makes them feel better about themselves, or it's a goal that they have, for example. So we want to understand all these different things about their customers. And because we're going to be doing research after we've had the discovery meeting, we also want to have a really good foundation that we can then start building on. But one thing that's really important here is to verify how your client knows this information. Sometimes clients are really sure in their mind who their customer is, but they're going on feeling, not on facts. So let's say they have surveys, website analytics, if they have information about their sales, that's super helpful information because you know that's verified. But if they're saying, well, we meet a lot of people and they seem to be this type of person, that's something you can say, okay, good, that's a great starting point. We're going to do some research and see how that compares to other competitors, for example. When it comes to how to ask these questions, I think you could do it in two structures, and you could also combine them if you'd like. So the first one is to do straight personas. So here we start by asking all the basic demographic information, and then we can go into things like what are their interests, who influences them to buy, how does they want the brand to make them feel, all these questions that can be really insightful. Or you can do more of a buyer kind of user journey. So let's say they have a problem, they Google how to solve it, they find your website, they browse your products, pick one, so forth, and see which decisions that they make at each step of the process there. So that can be quite insightful for understanding the psychology behind someone buying something. A benefit of using a buyer journey is that it will actually reveal a lot of the brand touch points to you. So let's say that they talk about their website, their packaging, and their customer support. Then that's something you need to think about. How is the brand going to work in all of those different instances? And that means that when you're presenting, let's say, mock-ups, you can be hyper specific and show, here's what your brand will look like on this packaging that we talked about. If your client has really different types of audiences that they sell to, but they all fit into their business, you might want to urge them to create a couple different personas. And here, it might get a little bit tedious. Let's say you have 3 personas and quite a lot of questions for each. You might want to take a break in between a couple, just to make sure that people don't feel like it's repeating and doing all this work over and over again. The next section is competitors and inspiring brands. And here I want to make sure that I'm asking both about direct competitors and indirect competitors. So let's say I'm designing for an ice cream brand. A direct competitor would be like other ice cream brands, but indirect competitors might be other snacks like cookies or candies or froyo, for example. So I want to make sure that we ask them about, okay, do you know who your competitors are? Which feel like indirect, which feel like direct competitors? And you could also ask them follow-up questions like, which of these would you say is the closest to your audience? Which one of them do you really like the brand of? And is there something we could use from these brands that you would like to incorporate in your own, for example? The last and maybe most important section from our design works perspective is how might we questions. So if you're familiar with design sprints, they usually start off with how might we questions. And these are questions that are basically going to be the goal of the branding project. So instead of just having this kind of more vague definition of we want to create a nice brand or an effective brand, we want to get really specific for this one client. So for example, how can we create a brand that tells our story better? Or how can we create a brand that is targeting this new audience better? So having these really specific questions will basically mean that when we show concepts or when we show anything, we can point back and say, this is why we created this concept, because it's solving the how might we question. You can have quite a few. I think the more you have, of course, the more different targets you're trying to hit. So I always like to encourage us to have between 1 and maybe 5 or 6, just so it doesn't get too scattered. But it's no problem to have more than one, because it still gives you an idea of the things that matter to your clients. So now that we know the actual sections that we're going to include in our discovery, we want to get back to those other things that matter, which is to have a really clear and engaging way to run the meeting and an easy way for you to record and then share this information with your clients. And I think this is where really helpful digital tools come in. There are so many great tools that can help you collaborate in a visual way when you're having a remote meeting, but you can use them when you're having a meeting in person as well. And just let's say have your computer out, or if there's a TV that you can have your computer connected to, that's also a really great way of doing it. I use an app called Olibrief because it is actually specifically created for discovery meetings and creating joint briefs, and I'm able to set up different sections that my client can get a clear overview of the different sections we're going to cover, and then I can type and fill in these sections as we go through the discovery meeting. So for example, when I talked about competitors before, I showed you this competitor map where we have the direct competitors as the kind of A circle, and then we have the more indirect competitors further and further away from the middle. And having these kind of visual cues that can feel a lot more collaborative, it makes the meeting run a lot more smoothly in my experience. There's also lots of great tools like InVision or Miro, for example, that let you do more of like a drag and drop, or different people can write things simultaneously. You can do more of like a design sprint format where, let's say, everyone takes 2 minutes in silence to write how might we questions, and you can all put them up on the board. Which tools you choose are mostly up to your own preferences and the way that you like to work. So do you want it to feel super collaborative and visual, or do you want it to feel like a very structured document? It really is up to you. So maybe test out a couple and run like a little trial run, like a tech run with one of your friends, and see which one you prefer. If you want to stick with the tools you have, and especially if budget is a concern, that you don't want to pay for anything, you can also create really nice presentation setups with questions and areas to fill in, let's say, Keynote or PowerPoint, for example. I did that for the first 5 years of my business, and it worked great. It was just a little bit more work setting it up in the first place, but I created a template for that, and then I could just fill it in for each new meeting. Once you have the discovery document all prepared, make sure that you add it to the client portal that we created last time. This means that both you and the client can always find it super quickly. I hope this felt really actionable and helpful. Next episode is going to be all about how to create brand research and really nice mood boards that make your work process a lot easier. So I'm super excited about that. If you want to know when that episode comes out, make sure that you're subscribed and that you also hit that notification bell if you want to get notified. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck with your projects, and see you next time.